If we're talking about a response being ill-judged, it couldn't be more ill-judged.
It is, Presiding Officer, an insult to the Chamber and indeed to the people of Scotland.
If this bill is not fit for purpose, don't vote for it.
Will she publish that advice and modelling now?
What is required is not just a change of personnel, but a change of political culture.
We now move to First Minister's questions.
This whole process will be fair, open and transparent.
Holyrood is set to lose a wealth of experience, including MSPs who have served since the Parliament's inception in 1999. Alex Neil is a former Health Secretary. His long career has taken him from Labour to the SNP, from devolutionist to backing independence and Brexit. From Ayrshire mining stock, he has seen every twist and turn in Scottish politics for over half a century. Alec Neil, 1999, it wasn't quite the dawning of the age of Aquarius, but it was the start of a new Scotland, and the Constitutional Steering Group said of the Parliament it should be open, it should be accountable, and it should be transparent. In your view, has it been all of these things?
Well, let me make a distinction between the Parliament and the government, because they're two separate things. I actually would say that the Parliament, generally speaking, has been very open and very transparent. There's a real effort to do that in the committees and in its various formats. There are still many things we could do. For example, I don't think we have been strong enough in terms of opening up the Parliament and making it less rigid and less under the control of the party hierarchies. All the parties these days are run like Stalinist organisations, and that's not good for democracy. But I think when you compare the openness, transparency and accountability of the government, and I think the problem is that the Parliament has not been strong enough in standing up to government. Too often the conveners in the Scottish Parliament, if they are government party people, they follow the government line, and if they're opposition party people, they follow the opposition line. They're not there to follow anybody's line, they're there to hold government to account. And sometimes you get a strong convener who does that, but too often we have conveners who are in effect appointed by the party leaders. That's hopeless.
You got the opportunity to be a minister, to effect real change. Was it a frustrating exercise for you, trying to do things which are heartfelt and which you've believed all of your life, but every minister comes up against that thing called the machine?
Absolutely. It was both exhilarating and exciting. I think the key thing is, and one of the things I did before I became a minister for many a long year, like yourself, Bernard, is I saw other people in action, and you could see who were the effective cabinet ministers and who were a complete waste of space. So in my first job as a Minister of Housing, I walked in and handed the Chief Civil Servant a task list with 18 tasks on it and told him to report back on progress in 2 days' time. And the message was, I'm in charge, I'm driving this, I know what I want, your job is to deliver it.
Powell said that all political careers end in failure, and that's probably over harsh, because a lot of people can point back to a record of public service and say, I did that well. I suspect what he was getting at is that at the end of a political career, people get frustrated about what they haven't achieved. So in that sense, what's your low point? What was the low point?
Oh, the low point for me as a nationalist was losing their independence referendum, because I actually thought that we had a good chance of winning it. So that was a low point. I have to say Donald Dure's death was a low point, because although Donald was the Labour Party and I was in the SNP at that time, I'd always got on very well with Donald, and it was a big blow, particularly when the Parliament was under so much attack at that time from the media. And Donald was under enormous attack as well, a bit unfairly in some cases. But clearly, he was a big loss to Scottish politics.
Joanne Lamont was Labour's sixth leader of the devolved era and a former communities minister. An activist from the 1970s, she has been swept along by Labour's dominance and bruised by their decline. how good has the institution of Parliament been in the whole business of holding government to account?
Well, I think there's a huge gap between the theory of what was supposed to happen and the reality. Now, that's something to do with the nature of Scottish politics over the last period. I look at Westminster, which I never thought I would look to say, is this a model that we'd want to follow? But you do see there where government comes under pressure, it's because there's the construction of an alliance between government backbenchers, the opposition parties, and, if you like, the country as a whole.
The parties that have been in control since devolution, Labour, assisted by the Liberal Democrats and the SNP, park to one side the whole issue of constitutional change. These parties are nominally social democratic parties of sorts, and yet it strikes me as an outsider looking in that the overriding ideology of the last 20 years has been managerialism. In short, the Parliament, irrespective of who's been in charge, simply hasn't been radical enough.
I've been in the Parliament 21 years. My children were toddlers when I started, and you see in them developing a character and maturity now. And I think that the Scottish Parliament has stuck and has become even more immature. Good governance is not just about giving people things, it's about making choices. We have not made one hard choice confronting the COVID pandemic. We've had one announcement from a government Minister for Education in this crisis that he wants to spend £230 million a year on free school meals for all children at school. And we're not even able to have the maturity to say, is there something else we could spend that money on? Is the idea that there are lots of good things amongst which you must choose has been lost. And we now have got to the point, frankly, where I believe that almost all of the kind of left of centre politics wants to capture a policy idea in an offer, but then doesn't whether that's deliverable or whether that offer is easier to sell than the thing that actually has to be done.
What's been the high point from your point of view in the 20-odd years you've been there?
I do think there is there's loads of interesting things that all of us done. It's been a huge privilege. And I was privileged to be leader of my own party at a really, really difficult time for the country. And I would not forget that. But everything, when I think back on the 21 years, the things that I felt proudest of was when people who came to me for help and the institutions and systems were closing them out or dismissing them, that we got the system to listen to them. And as a consequence, perhaps legislation also changed. There's been a series of low points, obviously, because the failure to win the argument. But I believe, as passionately as I ever did, that we need a party of the left that talks to people's lives, now more than ever. When we talk about the constitutional argument, my outrage is that we would want to expend any time, energy, whatsoever on doing anything other than looking at the consequence of the COVID crisis. We don't even know the scale of it yet.
Adam Tomkins is an academic, a one-term Tory MSP who came to politics later than Alex and Joanne. His take, therefore, brings a recent perspective from someone who in the early days of Holyrood was an outsider looking in.
The high point has definitely been the ability that you have as an MSP to try and make better laws for the people of Scotland. And even as an opposition MSP, when you're in a parliament of minorities, you have as much opportunity as anybody else to try and contribute positively to legislative debate. The low point has been very recent, and it's this sense, this gnawing sense that we all have, I think, that the Scottish Parliament does not have the ability, or perhaps that the Scottish Parliament doesn't have the willingness really to get under the skin of the various corruption scandals that are beginning to circle around. Any time a politician says we need a public inquiry on this, it's an admission of parliamentary failure, because it's the job of the Parliament to hold the government effectively to account. And if you can't do that, then you do have to start wondering why that is and what's going wrong.
Do you think the Parliament in the last 20 years has been particularly radical? As a journalist looking in, I'm struck by the fact that although the three parties that have been in government in that time have been of the centre-left, that their general approach to government and to particularly reorganising institutions of the state and the spending of money appears to be sort of unduly conservative.
Well, I don't know if there's anything undue about being a conservative, Bernard, but yeah, I mean, the Scottish Parliament has not flexed its muscles, right? It has not flexed its muscles legislatively, and it certainly hasn't flexed its muscles with regard to holding the government to account. There is an awful lot more that the Scottish Parliament could and should have done to transform Scotland in the last 20 years than it has done.
Very often when people go into parliamentary chambers or go into politics, they become addicted to it and they stay forever and ever and ever. This is a drug which you have not been addicted to. Do I take it from that your experience of the Scottish Parliament, from your point of view, has been a frustrating one?
It has been frustrating, but that's not. I don't think that's why I'm leaving. I'm really glad that I've done it. I'm really glad that I've had the opportunity to do it. I've learned more about my adopted city of Glasgow in the last 5 years as a Glasgow MSP than I have done in all of the rest of the time I've lived here. I have enjoyed the lawmaking aspects of what we're able to do as MSPs. But in all of the time I was an MSP, I never fully left my old life. I've always maintained links with the University of Glasgow, and I miss the old me. I miss teaching. I miss my students. I miss long evenings in the library poring over the law books. I want to get all of that back.
Alec, Joanne and Adam won't be riding into the political sunset. They have too many opinions to be filed under past politicians. Expect them to make future interventions that will be a cause for those who lead to stop and think.
You've got a choice, right? As a politician, you can either play to the gallery, and that's largely what the chamber is for, or you can get on with the business of actually seriously trying to improve the law and thereby hopefully to improve the lives of the people that you seek to represent.
They need to let the Parliament breathe and let people say things that are different from what the majority are saying, because that's how you get progress. I'm a great fan of Albert Camus, and he used to say that the source of all progress is rebellion. And I do try to live up to that motto from time to time.
My optimism is that for all my concerns about the sometimes lazy approach to politics, which is, we'll do this, but don't ask me how we're going to do it or how we're going to fund it. I think the institution is now a recognised institution, and that is solid. And in the early days of the Parliament, even that, I think, seemed very vulnerable.